Good afternoon. Calling of the meeting of the Capital Improvement Street Maintenance Committee of the City of Wausau to order this Thursday, February the 8th, 2024 at 5:15 p.m. A quorum of the committee is present. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the January 11th, 2024 meeting. A motion to approve would be in order. There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Any comments or questions with regard to the minutes of January the 11th, 2024? Hearing no questions or comments, all in favor of the said motion to approve the minutes of January 11th, 2024, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is agreed to, and the minutes of January the 11th, 2024 are approved. Moving then on to the next item on the agenda is the discussion and possible action on final plat for Vistas at Greenwood Hills, First Edition, and associated easement document. Alan, I would trust.
Yes. The map is included, the application's included. There are 7 residential lots on the north side of the proposed reserve drive. We're recommending approval of the plat. There's still some details to be worked out. The easement document was just their final version was presented today, and staff has not had an opportunity to review that. I know our city surveyor is working through that, so there may be some tweaks to the easement document, and the developer's agreement is in a draft form. Both of those, the easement documents and the developer's agreement, will have to be finalized before it goes to council. But I would anticipate staff could work those 2 things out before this final plat goes to council. But I think the general layout we are in agreement with. I don't know if Brad Lenz has something to say, but if you have any questions, we can answer them. I know Mr. Wanzerski's in the crowd too. He may be able to answer some questions, but that's all I have.
Okay. A motion to approve the final plat would be in order.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Any comments or questions with regard to the motion approving the final plot? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is agreed to, and the final plat with maybe some tweaks is approved. Moving then on to the next item on the agenda, discussion possible action on preliminary plat for Green Tree Meadows.
Yes, so this is a preliminary plat that came in. You saw in your packet the location. The general location is basically east of 72nd Avenue. It's to the north of like Sarissa Drive, Cabin Drive, and that subdivision there. The preliminary plat is also included. Staff has worked with Vreeland and Associates to kind of tweak this a little bit, and I think they've done a good job moving stuff around. You know, kind of the layout is obviously to maximize the number of lots, but also to minimize the impacts to the wetlands. So staff recommends approving the preliminary plat.
Okay, a motion would be in order to approve the preliminary plat.
I'll move.
There is a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I second that.
There is a second. Any comments or questions with regard to the motion? Hearing none, all, yes.
I do have one question.
Yes.
So you have the groundwater runoff. Any concerns there? You mentioned the water. It looks like from the picture there's a few ponds in that site.
There are wetlands scattered throughout. They did their best to put the roads where they come across the narrowest crossings of the wetlands, and they're trying to keep the disturbance under 10,000 square feet, which is pretty minimal. Stormwater, the overall stormwater plan for the project will be worked out, and TJ will see those plans. So, I mean, those will get worked out with the final plat and the final plan.
Okay, so okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so there are some outlots created. I mean, the things that'll have to be worked out before the final plat will be the the layout of the outlots for the stormwater detention, and also if there's any parkland dedication. But I mean, the general layout is, for the preliminary plat, is what we're approving here, and I think the layout works.
Okay, it looks good. One other minor question there. It looks like one little piece of that plot is like carved out for, is that for Stettin then?
There is a parcel in there that is still in the town of Stettin that did not annex when that came in. So you're right, there is a small parcel there that will remain in the town of Stettin unless something happens between now and then.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions with regard to the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion to approve the preliminary plat, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion, hearing no no's, motion is agreed to. And moving on to discussion possible action on urban non-point source and stormwater management planning grant agreement. I would think that's TJ, yes.
All right. So back in March of 2023, I came to CISM to ask for a resolution of support to submit for this grant. We were awarded the grant in the full amount of $170,000, which is a 50-50 match with the DNR. So if we end up spending the entire amount, it would be about $85,000 responsibility for the city. This would be a planning grant. So this would include a stormwater quality management plan update, which would include items such as BMP alternative analysis, existing conditions, BMP analysis, and then the stormwater feasibility study that we've discussed multiple times. If approved, we will go to RFP in the near future to select a consultant that will help us wade through these items and eventually submit to the DNR.
Excellent. Okay. Let's, a motion to approve
Yep.
the grant agreement.
Yep, I'll move to approve the grant acceptance.
And is there a second?
I'll say.
There is a second. Lisa, did you have a question?
No, that was it, the
Okay.
motion.
Any comments or questions with regard to the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is agreed to, and the grant agreement is approved. Thank you. Then moving on to the next item, is discussion and possible action on this closure of railroad crossings. We have a little presentation this evening for that, so.
Yes, sorry, we're going to slow it down a little bit. We've been moving pretty fast, so. Right, so this is related to the development of the River Edge Trail. And so as you recall, back in 2023, the city purchased what is the former county materials property. You could see it right there, up on the north side of the northern part of the east riverfront. And the idea is to extend the River Edge Trail from Winton Street along the river, and then cross up the top there, cross over the railroad tracks, and go into Gilbert Park and 6th Street. And also on the former County Materials site is a private railroad crossing, which County Materials would use to get from one side of the property to the other. That private crossing is tied to the business and is effectively, not ours. And we were originally kind of hoping that the railroad would consider that one being removed as, something, to our credit for our project. But that seems to not be the case. So whenever you petition for a new railroad crossing, the railroad typically wants you to take at least one away. So given those parameters, we went ahead and we looked. This is the Federal Railroad Administration map of all the crossings. There's a couple different things here. The orange dots are all the at-grade crossings. The dark blue are the under or overpass, and the light blue are signals. So we were able to look at all of the crossings in the city of Wausau and kind of narrow them down to 3 choices, and they're all contained in that box, which, as you can see, no, that's okay, Brad, go ahead, is the line that goes across the river and out west, kind of along the southern edge of Marathon County Park. But then there's also another line that comes back east that goes to the 3M plant. So we went ahead, and this is kind of the analysis that we did throughout the rest, is we removed the trail crossings, sidewalk crossings, a park access. Just keep clicking, Brad. There you go. Business access, and then finally any street crossings, which is most of the crossings in the city. And that left us with these 3 options, which are alley crossings. And
Well, just to add, these are all on the spurs and not the main line. If you look on the east side, that's the main line of the railroad that goes north. So in terms of, volume of traffic and speed and stuff, these are probably more desirable than on the main line.
yeah. And just to be clear, what we're looking to do is to block access to remove the crossing in the alley. So, removing the material in between the tracks that allow you to drive over it, and then putting up a physical barrier at the parcel boundaries of the right-of-way. We're not talking about vacating an alley, okay? So we can look at the options here. So option A is in between 3rd Ave and 4th Ave with Stewart Street on the north, Stewart Avenue on the north, and Garfield on the south. This seems to be pretty typical city block. This cuts across, and it seems like there would probably be access maintained for any of the users, either on the north side or south side, if you were not able to cross in that alley. B is on, this is part of the section that comes back east. So this is in between 8th Ave and 9th Ave, West Street and Sherman Street. This, also goes through the middle of the block, but this kind of has an interesting little parcel right there, which has some challenging access issues because they don't access their parcel from the front, from 9th Ave. They have a garage around the back. I can't speak nor endorse however they may be accessing their garage right now, but it kind of seems that blocking off that alley might create a less than safe option for them. Go to the next one, Brad. And then this one is a little bit further to the east, so between 3rd Ave and 1st, Sherman and West, and kind of a similar situation where you have kind of a residential parcel there that is kind of in a unique spot. And again, they don't have any access off of 3rd, and they're coming in to access their property off of the alley. So, with the idea of, having as little disruption as possible and trying to maintain, a safe situation, probably barriers on this alley would also not be ideal. So looking through that, our recommendation is to, pursue option A. And then, so Brad and I had a chance to go take a look at it. We checked all the driveway, garage access. So on the left is Stewart Avenue there, the orientation's turned. And you have everybody on Stewart Avenue going out to Stewart Avenue. There is that one property that has a garage in the back, and they use a little bit of the alley. Everyone on 4th goes out to 4th. And then 3rd Avenue, you have 2 residential units there, and then, which do access the alley. That's where they have a garage and or parking, surface parking on the back. And then you have 2 commercial lots right there, and of course the Marjan Motel right there goes off of 3rd Ave. So looking at, if you were to block off that alley access, people could still either, still travel either north or south on that alley. It may make it a little bit more inconvenient if they do happen to use the alley, but it would not make it impossible. So really what we're looking, and there's some images there of the alley and the rail line as well. What we want to do next is, with direction from this committee on the choices there, is to gather some input from the property owners and the residents, and bring that input back to CISM, possibly with the resolution, or see how, if the input would drastically change our plans or not, kind of take it from there. But I'm giving you, unfortunately, these are the three best options.
So are you looking for action with regard to these options also, in addition to the, or just, or?
So eventually, what'll happen is when we petition the Office of the Commissioner of the Railroad, the OCR, that'll come in with two petitions, one to close a crossing, another to open a crossing. And those will have to be, what they require is a resolution for each of those from the City Council.
Right.
So there'll be a little bit more process before any final decisions are made. But right now, we're just want some, I guess, concurrence of opinion here on the path forward.
Right. Okay, Lisa?
So assuming that we were then to direct you to pursue option A, obviously then we go out and network with the adjacent neighbors. And so if a barrier is created where there's no access to the tracks in that area, it might be reasonable to assume, because this is one of the neighborhoods that has been very loudly complaining about horn use, train horn use. Over here, and then obviously all points west towards 17th, that's been the neighborhood that's been,
Right.
Complaining about that noise. So assuming that there is less access to the track, is there even a chance that that helps them? I mean,
I know what they mean by horn noise, because I used to work at CPZ right next to the tracks on the other side of the river, and invariably every time we had a meeting, horn would blare.
yeah.
I kind of doubt it, because they go across two street crossings
Oh,
there.
sure. Okay.
I'd love to say yes, but
Because I think
don't
that's a
so.
question you're going to get from those neighbors.
Yeah.
Just because it's been a live topic over there. So, but I agree that A seems like the best one if we have to give up any of the three. It's less disruptive to the surrounding area. So I would make a motion to direct staff to begin a process on option A, and then report back the results.
Is there a second to the said motion?
Yeah, I'll second it.
There is a second. Any comments or questions? Doug?
Yeah, just refresh my memory then. So the one up there by County Concrete, we can't count that as a closure?
That's a private crossing. So
Private crossing, but it's
Private
still,
versus public.
but it's being eliminated for the railroad purposes, correct?
Right, but we're asking for a public crossing, so I think that has a little bit different use profile and restrictions on there. Again, this is, coming from the railroad, which they kind of act as a black box. And,
But if we could deal that one off, it's a low cost to us to
I'd
do.
love
would
to.
be-
I'd love to,
Yeah.
but I want to be able to go into this petition with the OCR with the best chances possible of success of a new crossing.
Yeah, we've been talking with the railroad. It's been an ongoing discussion for several months now, and we talked about this crossing, and their position was that it was a private crossing that did not transfer to the new ownership. It was,
Yeah.
in fact, private. So, but with that said, I think they're willing to work with us on. And we can, when we write the petition, that can be a factor. Say, hey, you got rid of this crossing. Maybe it doesn't count as an official closing, but it is one that did go away.
So really, they're getting 1.5 or 2 for one.
Yeah, and sometimes when we've talked to the railroad before, they've said, you got to look at 3 crossings, closing 3 instead of 3 for 1. So our negotiation so far has been relatively positive. So, yeah, I think we'll proceed with the one and see where that gets us. You know, we can mention this one that we were looking to essentially move. It's not really an option, but again, it is one that went away, so we should get some credit for that, hopefully.
Yes?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to see us try as hard as possible to count that towards our batch. With closing of A, would there be a public input session after the petition goes around, I'm assuming, or?
So we kind of talking about that is we definitely want to send out a letter because make sure that the property owners are notified. We'll have to go around to, because I believe there's some rentals in that area as well. And we've been talking about maybe doing a meeting of some sort. We're not quite sure where in that area. But at the same time, we kind of want to see how we do with a letter and maybe a door-to-door because it's a pretty finite number of properties.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have the Worley Park meeting there, so if you need a time and a place, you guys can always come and
Okay.
we can talk about it, the date, and if
Sure.
you're looking for a place to get people together.
That's a good idea.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Comments or questions with regard to the motion in front of you? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Motion is agreed to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the discussion possible action on the purchase of icebreaker equipment for the Department of Public Works. Dustin, yes.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, so I included in the packet as much of the background information so that you guys kind of knew where this was coming from. Obviously, we've had some complaints about our residential streets when we get ice and snow buildup, stuff like that. We did look at some of the other options as far as plowing more, using more material, stuff like that. But it's costly, harmful to the roads, environment, all that stuff. And so this was one option that actually came from one of our street crew members. We have an operator that came from Colorado, and icebreakers are more common out west where they don't use salt on the roads. And he asked about it, and we didn't know what he was talking about, so we did some research. So this was kind of what we were looking at to give you guys another option if we would like to do more with our side streets when we get buildup, when we get ice, stuff like that. It would just be one more option where we would have a piece of equipment that could go out and do some removal and try and get rid of some of that.
A motion to approve would be in order. We can take the motion before the comments or questions.
Sure.
Go
So
ahead.
I'll move to approve, and then I have a comment.
Okay, is there a second to approve? There is a second. Thank you. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. So I'm excited to see this. In my area, at least, well, when we actually had winter, not this year, but when we had winter, I received an awful lot of complaints about side streets in my area. And so then, we just recently had looked at the cost of additional product and curb-to-curb sanding and all these things that are not sustainable. I would love to have this as a treatment option for streets, because if we get a winter where you get a bunch of rain and a bunch of snowpack and then freeze and thaw keeps happening, sometimes those streets are in a bad state beyond the corners. And that's when all the complaints come from either people who are trying to walk when there's no sidewalks, delivery people, whatnot. And so I think this would be a great addition to the fleet to try. I mean, at least try one and see how it is. And if it turns out that it's, a winner, then we'll have some positive feedback, I'm sure, from neighborhoods. So I'm excited to see this.
Question, Doug?
Thank you. You mentioned Colorado. Have you seen any of these in operation, like locally?
Not locally. The closest would be Minnesota DOT. They actually use them on some of their highways out there. They've been doing it for about 10 years. They've had pretty good luck with them, and they're continuing to purchase more of them. But that's about the closest that I've found. It was
Okay.
tough. I reached out to all of our local vendors. Nobody had anything like this, so everything I found was all online, doing the research there. I had one vendor locally that tried to get in touch with one of these companies that I was contacting, so he was just going to be a middleman between us and them anyways.
I forgot to look. These guys are, where are they out of?
Canada. This company
Okay.
is Canadian-based, yep.
And they build them up there?
Yep.
Okay. And then lastly, you indicated potential offset of salt, sand. Any kind of thoughts on, any feedback on how much that could be?
Boy, it's so
Our strategy would be-
much depends on the winter, but basically, with this unit, it gives us the option, anytime you start getting that snowpack and that ice on the side streets, we can come out, break it up, scrape it down to the pavement, and then let the sun do its job, and so there's just that much less material. You know, once you get it off the road, typically the sun will do its work and start clearing things, but you got to get rid of that layer.
Sorry, one last question, if I may.
Of course.
Is there any special training or concerns with who operates this and how it's operated?
No, I'm confident all of our loader operators could run this. They're already familiar with running the loader and how to maneuver on the streets with it. It's just an attachment that would go on our front end loader. Basically, it works kind of like a plow. So they'll have the breaker runs in front of it. There's no hydraulic drive or nothing. It just sits on the ground. The weight of it pushes down and it spins. And then there's a built-in snow plow on the back side of it that'll just then scrape it. So it's basically just acts like when they're running around plowing.
Good, I agree. I think this is a good idea. My question was, is one enough? But we'll see what one does. And then,
You can buy me more if you want.
well, we'll see what one
Yeah.
does, because I
Yeah,
think
this
this
would
is
be
a
kind
good
of like our
idea.
pilot to try
Right,
it and
right,
see how
right.
it works and see what we think of it.
Great. Yes,
Thanks, Gary. So you said that when it starts getting salted out, what would you typically do, like today? Would you go put gravel or sand down to get traction there?
Correct. Like on all of our residentials and stuff, we pretty much expect to have hard pack and it's going to build up there. And then we just apply our sand on all the intersections, curves, hills, that kind of stuff.
I
So
think
this
this
would
is
be
gonna be a big win because I get a lot of calls about sand or gravel getting into driveways or into medians, and being an issue. So, cool. Thank you.
great. Any further comments or questions with regard to the motion? Yes.
Sorry, one more, Gary.
Don't,
When would we take delivery and where would this be expensed?
That's something, if you guys want to move it forward, obviously we'd have to do a budget mod. It's not in our budget now, so we'd have to take this to finance and see what we can come up with for funding.
Okay, so we wouldn't anticipate ever using it this year. It'd be something for
Yeah,
next
the
year.
delivery times are looking at probably a month and a half to 2 months out anyways, so it's going to be kind of late for this year
Okay,
to try and get it, but.
okay. Plan ahead.
any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is agreed to. Thank you very much. Moving then on to continual agenda item discussion, possible action on CISM's committee duties and responsibilities. You received some information from the city attorney. And do you want to lead us off, or good minutes from last month? Thank you, the staff, for the minutes. Quite comprehensive.
Sure, this is interesting, bouncing back and forth between the discussion here and then at ED and now back here. They're all kind of, some of you overlap, which is good because they're all kind of weaving together. And I think as this gets through all the committees and they all look at their descriptions and you agree at the method of which you're going to go about maybe tweaking these and rewriting them will be good. On the third page, I sort of summarized where I think we're at now, and I just included the same proposed ordinance that was in the packet the last time in case you wanted to use that to work from. But basically now the CISM committee by ordinance considers requests or proposals for the sale only of city-owned property, with the exception of those duties assumed by the Economic Development Committee, which is the sale of land in the business campus and land acquired by the city for redevelopment purposes, which isn't any further defined than that, and by virtue of the property disposition program, which Tammy and I need to add more detail to as well. So that's when individual lots are for sale to the general public through the city website, and they decide to list them through a realtor or through an RFP, but I need to get more specifics about how and when they decide they're going to handle those sales that way and when they're going to go through Chapter 3 of the ordinances. I think we have a meeting scheduled next week, actually. So that's where it's at now. It doesn't address the purchase, just the sale with those 3 listed exceptions. So I don't know how you feel about whether you want to direct me to work with her to work something out so that purchase is worked back into the description of the duties of the CISM committee or not. That's a possibility.
Yes, Lisa.
Thank you. So I think, and, you know, where we kind of left off on this is we were kind of trying to figure out where the pinch points were, right? Where we were kind of struggling with this. And it seemed that, based on feedback that we had gotten from community development, that the programs that they manage already, that they've been given authority to manage, along with the property disposition program and the lands that are managed by economic development, all of those processes that were already in place make sense. And we kind of, it seems like we decided we didn't want to mess with that because it was in place for a reason and it was working. And so, you know, it seemed like when we left here last time, our goal was really to match up our duties with where we appear in the ordinances, basically. And that's a long list already of work that we take care of. I mean, we've taken on all of the duties of parking and traffic. We always had all of the duties of infrastructure. And so I feel like, yes, Ann should work with Tammy to firm up the disposition program and make sure that's clearly aligned. But it seemed like the pinch point really was not even so much land acquisition for development, where we were feeling left out of the mix. It was land acquisition for public facilities, whether it be a firehouse, whether it be the DPW garage, whatever. I think when we look to acquire property for a public purpose, public use, that's not private sector development or subdivision type stuff, not business campus, that really is where I think this committee was expressing an interest in being more involved or being involved at all. And, you know, it led me back to when we started down this discussion last time a little bit. At one point when we talked about this before, there was even confusion generated by the name of this committee. No one knew how this committee came to be called, because it's been called many things, capital improvements and street maintenance, because we do more than street maintenance. And when you put capital improvements in the mix, you create conflict and confusion with the CIP committee, which is a process. And so, you know, back then I said we had even talked about changing the name of this committee to infrastructure, because that's what we do. But I feel like now if we were to take that a step further, if we're going to rewrite the description, I feel like this committee should actually be called what it is, infrastructure and facilities. Because that then really removes all of the ambiguity. The capital project selection that we do here is street and road. So we would still select the list of streets to be incorporated into the capital budget. The work that we do would not be affected at all. But I think it's easier for prospective committee members and the public to understand like what you get when you come here. And capital improvements makes no sense to anyone, at least not out on the street. And, you know, the county calls their infrastructure committee the infrastructure committee. I mean, that is easy for people to understand, and it makes sense. And, you know, we also then, when it comes to facilities management, you know, it's difficult because sometimes even with CIP, we have a person that watches over facilities and proposes facilities projects, and those come forward from Public Works and Engineering as a component of their budget. But there's really not a committee that looks at the condition of facilities. And, you know, we've been talking for a long time about trying to create a plan, you know, a maintenance plan for all these facilities. If we know a roof lasts 30 years and we know that, you know, certain things are going to be, you know, scheduled on a continuum, it would make sense that a committee like this would be who would manage that. So, you know, I guess I would like to see us call it what it is and make the work list match the ordinances, you know, and, you know, I think where we really have an interest in involvement when it comes to land, it's not so much buying acres and acres of land for industrial development. That wasn't what we were interested in. What we were interested in, and what it seemed like our committee chair was interested in, was being involved when land gets bought for public buildings. And so if we were to, you know, take on the focus that is, you know, infrastructure and facilities, all things facilities could be right in our wheelhouse, because we manage stuff like that now anyway, with the oversight of DPW. So, I feel like if we're going to make some change, let's make some meaningful change. So, and I don't think we should make the decision, like a final decision tonight. We don't, Lou's not here. And, he's very interested in this. So I feel like maybe what we should do, at least in ED where we left off the other night, was that we would bring some proposals back to the March meeting and then try and get this cleaned up before the new council sits in April. But that we still have a few weeks to work this through. And so if we could come up with a plan like that and maybe see it at our March meeting with something that we maybe could act on, would be helpful.
Any comments? Yes.
Thanks, Gary. I'd be all in favor of changing it. It makes sense. I mean, when I got assigned to CISM, what is that? So, yeah, I would be all for that. I do think this committee is still a key part of purchasing property. I think we have a lot of expertise as far as utilities, looking up drawings, what might have been there at some point, and just making sure we're not unearthing something we don't really want to unearth. So I think there's value of us looking at purchasing properties. And then I guess I hear all this, all CIP stuff, and I get why it's there. And in my head, I don't know who would do it, but as soon as it makes the list, even if it doesn't have a chance of getting through, it should probably still come to, either whoever is driving it to their standing, if it's a staff person, to their standing committee, or the chair should bring it up and at least talk about it in August, and then we're not as surprised come budget time in November. So that it's just kind of thoughts I've been having about it. So that's all I had. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Gary. And I guess I'm just going to agree, but if you look back at the history, we had different names, and we had the Street and Alley Maintenance Committee, Public Property and Capital Improvements Committee. So I guess as we evolve, call it what it is, and if that's streets and infrastructure, I guess I can't remember how you named it, but I would agree, though, that we should try to get this done before the end of the session, or the term, so we're not dumping it on a new council potentially to sort through this.
Right. Infrastructure and facilities was what I had mentioned, because oversight of public buildings then would make some sense as well.
I just want to react to Chad because I sort of, his 2 points, I think that it's a larger, the issue of the wording of property. I think that is sort of a word that I feel very strongly about, that, and how we incorporate that into the larger scheme of things is, I think, yet debatable. But I think also what Chad said about this committee being involved in some way with the CIP, I'm not sure what that looks like, but even just a listing or a present, that this is what's going to CIP, just so that we have a little bit of foreknowledge with regard to what is coming, what's in the chute, what's going, if it gets past CIP onto finance, that's a whole process. But I think we should at least know that those projects are being developed so that when they do come up, there's no surprises along the way. And I think that those are, I just want to echo what Chad said, because I think those are, but I still hang on the word of property. I think that's a larger issue maybe than fleet or facilities management, but I'm agreeable to work some wording out through that, but that's sort of where I'm at. Yes, Lisa.
Thank you. I think that's doable. The thing with CIP is that it's so wide-ranging, and I think we'd have to define what within CIP we're interested in specifically. I do agree with Chad that departments that are asking for things in CIP that represent new spending would be well-served to talk with their committee of oversight before they go that route. So if they need playground equipment, because it's all departments, so it's parks, it's playground equipment, it's technology, it's concrete repairs, it's like 100 different things. It's not just CISM things. So, the list of projects that, and I think the park committee does talk about what they're planning to propose for CIP, just like we talk about what streets we're planning to send to CIP. I think if memory serves from having been on that committee, we did used to talk about what the list looked like which parks we wanted to redo, what the rolling stock looked like, that type of stuff. So, if it's a matter of, I think where we run into trouble is when CIP is going to get requests for either land, buildings, or staffing. That's where I think we feel like we miss a step. So, if somebody feels that they're going to need a couple employees, they really should go to HR before they even get to CIP. And same thing here. If we want to, if somebody needs a new building, it would be a good idea to, get to the committee of jurisdiction and at least present that. Chances are, you will hit a better cross-section of council members prior to there's only 3 council members on CIP. I mean, they come from different disciplines, and they're on some of the committees in question, but we also can't rely on those 3 alders to report back to all those committees on behalf of whomever's asking. So, I think we could get a long way, I think, if we would start the CIP. It starts in July, but, say May and June, if we would at least on those committees have an agenda item that says, CIP planning. What are we going to ask for? So people kind of know. And that's an open public discussion as well. It ends up in the minutes. It's on TV. I mean, it's out there a little more. So you don't get to the end of the budget and everybody's like, whoa, this is all been paid for, basically, right? So, I think that direction would be wise to even as a staff directive, depending on what you intend to ask for, figure out what committee would want to know about that before it gets asked for. And I think that's maybe a management function that maybe doesn't even need to be in our description, but just as a matter of standard practice, it would make sense. So I don't know that we should make a final decision on this tonight, but.
Well, this was a good discussion.
Yeah, just getting a proposed name change and you making the distinction, Lisa, between facilities for public use and acquiring land for resale for private development is very helpful.
Could that be further defined? I'm not quite,
Yes, I think so.
Development so how do you define
And
development?
the way we wrote it into the ordinance at the time, because I said, well, how will we designate or memorialize or track that it was purchased for redevelopment purposes? And we just determined that if that were the reason, it should be placed in a resolution. And if it stated that that was why the council was acquiring it for that purpose, then we'd know which process it followed.
Because after a few years, then that purpose may have changed, and then,
True. Every time it's conveyed.
then what? I think that has to be a little bit more clearly defined, but I'm not. That's just me.
Thank
Yes.
you. Maybe the clarifying point, and maybe we're left or right of a line here, but when you are purchasing property to offer it up for either redevelopment or private sector development, your intent is that will be a tax generating property. And when you buy stuff for public use, that's either a public amenity or that is a public building that the city owns, that doesn't pay tax. So I think whether you are intending to acquire property for some sort of tax generating purpose might be where you start to define that. If you're going to put a park on it or some kind of an amenity or an art display, or you're going to put a public building on it or a facility, you're not going to generate income off that. But if you're going to redevelop or develop in general, the impetus is that you would be generating some income off that property in terms of revenue. And that may be where we could narrow that description a little bit. I mean, there's always exceptions for nonprofits and things like that, but I think just the intent in general is that you would make money off of development property.
Agreed. Thank you.
The other ones just cost you money, so,
Hence the term economic development.
there you go.
So hopefully if all the committees meet before the end of March, I don't know, you talked last night about maybe having a executive committee meeting or a committee of the whole to get all the descriptions together, and the entire council then meets, or at least the chairs of the standing committees meet as a group to go over and make recommendations to the full council as to adopting all the new duties / names of the standing committees. Does that make sense?
Right, since Mr. Larson's not here, the chair of this committee, I think we at least have one more
Sure.
meeting with regard to this.
Okay, very good.
Any further comments or questions? With that understanding, we'll proceed into, with the next meeting, we'll continue discussions and finalizing and finessing the wording and progressing.
All right, thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much. With that, being the last item on the agenda, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Chair.
Sorry, Doc.
Chair.
There is a second over here. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
I got this text or this email. He called me. There's something about it all. Like hanging over the road where you can barely see from the intersection up there. Is there anything we can do?
For sure.
Is there?
If it's in the right of way.
Okay.
Yeah, so then
Thank you.
Who should I take?
typically what we do, yeah, and he would take a look at it. Okay.
Get rid of
And
that
then-
for you if you'd like, or do you
So
want?
typically, if it's on private property, but hang it over.
it if you'd
I'll
like.
keep
then
it because
we'll
some of the
have to
things I
notify
need
the
to keep
owners,
in the,
Because we've just gone
so,
in and cut before. and then
I have a recycling bin at home, so
And
they'll
then we,
Okay.
I think it's like